The silence in our house had become a physical presence. It was the third week of Mark's business trip, a necessary but brutal stretch that left the rooms feeling too large and the nights impossibly long. We'd texted, we'd video called, but the digital ghost of my husband was a poor substitute for the warmth of his body next to mine in bed. The emptiness was a hollow ache in my chest, a constant, low-frequency hum of loneliness. That particular Thursday, the hum had escalated to a scream. I'd cleaned everything cleanable, read a book until the words blurred, and the four walls seemed to be pressing in. Driven by a restlessness I couldn't name, I pulled on a soft cashmere sweater, the grey one Mark said brought out the storm in my eyes, and decided to go to a jazz bar downtown I'd always meant to try. Maybe the sound of other people living their lives would make me feel less like a ghost in my own. The bar was all dark wood and low lighting, the air thick with the scent of old whiskey and perfume. A trio was playing something melancholic and sweet, the saxophone weaving a story of its own. I found a small table near the back, nursing a glass of red wine, letting the music wash over me. I was adrift in a sea of couples and friends, an island of one. And then I saw her. She was sitting at the bar alone, a silhouette of effortless elegance. A fall of dark, wavy hair cascaded down her back, and she was wearing a simple black dress that hinted at the graceful lines of her body. She was watching the band, a faint, appreciative smile on her lips. There was a quiet intensity about her, a self-contained stillness that was magnetic. Our eyes met across the smoky room. It was just a flicker, a momentary connection before we both glanced away. But a few minutes later, it happened again. This time, she didn't look away. She held my gaze, and a slow, curious smile touched her mouth. My heart, which had been beating a slow, lonely rhythm, suddenly kicked against my ribs. She picked up her wine glass and walked over. The space around my table seemed to shrink, the air crackling with a sudden, electric charge. "This seat isn't taken, is it?" Her voice was lower than I'd imagined, a warm, husky sound that felt like a physical touch. I shook my head, my own voice caught somewhere in my throat. "No, please." She introduced herself as Elara. We started with the polite, surface-level talk of strangers, the music, the unseasonable chill in the air, the book peeking out of her bag. But the current beneath was undeniable. Every glance held a second too long, every smile felt like a secret being shared. We talked about our lives, our work. I found myself telling her about Mark, about the hollow silence of the house, things I hadn't even fully admitted to myself. "It's the small things you miss," I said, tracing the rim of my glass. The weight of his arm over me in the middle of the night. The sound of his keys in the door. Elara listened, her dark eyes soft with understanding. "The space someone leaves behind can feel louder than their presence ever was," she said quietly. Her words resonated deep within me. We talked for what felt like minutes but must have been hours. The bar began to empty around us, the staff starting to clean up. The spell was breaking, and the thought of returning to my empty house felt like a physical blow. It was Elara who broke the silence that had fallen between us. She leaned forward, her voice dropping to a near whisper. "I have a suite at the Alexander, just a few blocks from here. The view of the city at night it's something to see. Would you like to share a nightcap? We don't have to let the night end just yet." The proposition hung in the air, thick and heavy with implication. It was reckless, it was dangerous, and every sensible part of me screamed to politely decline, to go home to my cold, empty bed. But a deeper, more primal part, the part that had been starving for connection, for warmth, looked at Elara, at the intelligence in her eyes, the gentle curve of her smile, and nodded. "Yes," I said, the word feeling like a vow. "I'd like that." The walk to the hotel was a blur of cold night air and the electric tension of our linked arms. We didn't speak. The silence between us was no longer empty. It was full, pregnant with anticipation. The grand lobby of the Alexander was quiet, all marble and muted gold, our footsteps echoing softly as we crossed to the elevator. Inside her suite, the world fell away. It was spacious and beautiful, but my eyes went straight to the floor-to-ceiling windows, the city laid out before us like a carpet of scattered diamonds. Elara moved to a small sidebar and poured 2 glasses of amber whiskey. She handed one to me. Our fingers brushed, and a jolt, warm and sharp, shot up my arm. She stood close, so close I could smell the faint, clean scent of her perfume, neroli and sandalwood. "To unexpected nights," she murmured, her eyes holding mine. "To not being alone," I whispered back. We clinked glasses, the sound a tiny, significant chime in the quiet room. We stood at the window, sipping our drinks, our shoulders almost touching. The tension was a living thing, coiling in the space between us. I was hyper-aware of everything. The smooth, cool glass in my hand, the heat radiating from her body, the quick, shallow rhythm of my own breathing. Then, she turned to face me. She reached out and gently tucked a strand of my hair behind my ear, her fingertips grazing my cheek. It was the most intimate gesture I had ever experienced. "You are so beautiful," she said, her voice barely audible. "There's a light in you, and I think it's been dimmed lately." Her perception undid me. Tears pricked at the corners of my eyes. I nodded, unable to speak. She took my glass and set it aside with hers. Then, she took both my hands in hers. "Let me," she whispered. "Just for tonight, let me remind you." She led me to the edge of the large bed and sat me down. She knelt before me, her hands moving to the buckles of my shoes. She removed them slowly, her thumbs pressing into the arch of my foot through my stocking, and a sigh of pure pleasure escaped my lips. It was an act of such tender service, so far from the frantic, familiar passion I shared with Mark, and it unmoored me completely. She looked up at me, her gaze unwavering. "Is this all right?" "Yes," I breathed. "More than all right." She stood then, and drew me to my feet. We were inches apart. The air was thick with the scent of us, of whiskey and perfume and raw, human want. Her hands came up to frame my face, her touch impossibly gentle. "May I?" she asked, her eyes dropping to my lips. I answered by closing the distance between us. The first kiss was not a collision, but a discovery. It was soft, searching, a slow map-making of sensation. Her lips were full and moved against mine with a devastating patience. It was a kiss that unspooled me, thread by thread. My hands came up to clutch at her shoulders, holding on as the world tilted on its axis. That first kiss was a key turning in a lock I didn't know existed. It began as a soft pressure, a question whispered against my mouth. Her lips were impossibly soft, moving with a languid, exploring grace that was entirely new to me. There was no urgency, only a deep, profound curiosity. She tasted of fine whiskey and the lingering sweetness of wine, a complex, intoxicating flavor that was uniquely Elara. My hands, which had been trembling at my sides, came up to rest on her shoulders, feeling the solid, real warmth of her through the silk of her dress. A small, broken sound escaped my throat, a surrender to the sheer sensory overload of it. She deepened the kiss slowly, her tongue tracing the seam of my lips until I opened for her. It was not an invasion, but an invitation. My own senses, which had been dulled by weeks of solitude, roared to life. The world narrowed to this. The soft slide of her mouth, the faint scent of sandalwood on her skin, the whisper-soft sound of our breathing mingling in the quiet room. It was a kiss that seemed to last for an eternity, each second stretching out, rich and full, rewriting my understanding of intimacy. When we finally broke apart, we were both breathless. My entire body was humming, alive with a current I hadn't felt in years. She didn't say a word, just kept her forehead resting against mine, her eyes closed, as if committing the moment to memory. Her hand slid from my face, down my neck, to my shoulders, pushing the soft cashmere of my sweater down my arms. It fell to the floor in a silent, grey pool. She stepped back, just half a pace, her dark eyes blazing with a soft, intense fire. Her gaze traveled over me, from my flushed face, down the line of my throat, to the simple lace of my bra. It was a look of pure, unadulterated appreciation, and under its heat, I didn't feel exposed or shy. I felt worshipped. "My turn," I whispered, my voice husky with a confidence I didn't know I possessed. My fingers went to the thin strap of her black dress on her shoulder. I pushed it down, following its path with my lips, kissing the warm, smooth skin it revealed. A shiver ran through her, and the sound she made, a low, pleased hum, was the most powerful thing I had ever heard. I found the zipper at the side of her dress and slowly drew it down. The fabric sighed open, and she stepped out of it, letting it puddle on the floor next to my sweater. We stood there, in the dim light from the city, clad only in our underwear. The atmosphere was so thick with feeling I could almost taste it, a heady mix of anticipation, reverence, and a profound, aching loneliness that was finally being answered. She reached behind her back and unclasped her bra, letting it fall away. I did the same. There were no more words. They were unnecessary. The language we spoke now was older, more direct. Her hands found the waistband of my trousers, and she looked at me, one last question in her eyes. I nodded, my own hands moving to the delicate lace of her panties. We undressed each other slowly, with a ritualistic care, every brush of a finger, every revealed patch of skin a new verse in this silent, sacred poem. And then we were bare, standing skin to skin in the moonlight streaming through the vast window. The city lights glittered, indifferent to the small, human drama unfolding high above it. She took my hand and led me to the bed. The sheets were cool and crisp against my feverish skin as I lay back. She followed me down, her body aligning with mine, a perfect, breathtaking fit. What happened next was a symphony of sensation, a journey of rediscovery. Her mouth was everywhere, a hot, open-mouthed kiss on my neck that made me arch off the bed, a slow, torturous trail down my sternum, the gentle, worshipful caress of her hands mapping the planes of my stomach, the curve of my hips. She was learning me, and in learning me, she was reminding me of myself. I had been a wife, a half of a whole, for so long, but in this moment, under her reverent touch, I was just a woman, a universe of nerve endings and longing. I turned the tables, rolling her onto her back. I wanted to give her this same gift, this feeling of being utterly seen and desired. I kissed the hollow of her throat, the soft swell of her breasts, the delicate inside of her wrist. I learned the rhythm of her breathing, the little gasps and sighs that were my guides. My hands explored the long, elegant line of her back, the dip of her waist, the strong muscles of her thighs. It was an exploration, a conversation held entirely in touch and taste and sound. The world outside, my life, my husband, all of it receded into a distant, unimportant haze. There was only this room, this bed, this woman, and the rising, crashing wave of feeling she was drawing from the deepest, most neglected parts of me. The intimacy was almost unbearable, a beautiful, painful cracking open of my soul. It was passion, yes, a deep, rolling thunder of it, but it was also a profound and startling tenderness. It was the intimacy of being known, not as a partner or a wife, but simply as a human being, hungry and alive. And as the tension coiled impossibly tight and finally, gloriously, broke, my cry was muffled against her skin, a release that felt like both a surrender and a homecoming. It was not just a physical climax, but an emotional dam breaking, washing away weeks of loneliness in a single, shuddering wave. In the aftermath, we lay tangled together, limbs heavy and slick with sweat. The only sound was our ragged breathing slowly returning to normal. She pulled the duvet over us, and I curled into her side, my head on her chest, listening to the strong, steady beat of her heart. Her fingers traced idle, soothing patterns on my bare back. No one spoke. There were no promises, no talk of the future, no whispered secrets of the past. There was just this, the warm, solid reality of another human being, the shared warmth under the covers, the silent, mutual understanding of what we had given each other. It was a perfect, self-contained moment outside of time and reality. I must have drifted to sleep, because I was woken by the first hints of dawn painting the sky in shades of rose and gold. The city below was still quiet, the lights beginning to dim against the growing light. Elara was still asleep beside me, her dark hair fanned out on the pillow, her face peaceful in repose. I watched her for a long time, memorizing the curve of her eyelashes, the relaxed line of her mouth. There was no regret, only a deep, profound gratitude. This night with her hadn't been about Mark, or about being unfaithful in the traditional sense. It had been about me. It had been a lifeline thrown to a drowning part of my soul. Quietly, I slipped out of bed. I gathered my clothes from the floor and dressed in the pale morning light. I didn't wake her. Our story was a single, perfect chapter, and it was complete. I wrote a single word on a piece of hotel stationery, "Thank you," and left it on the pillow next to her. Walking out of the hotel and into the crisp morning air, I felt different. The hollow ache in my chest was gone, replaced by a quiet, humming fullness. The memory of Elara's hands, her mouth, her quiet intensity, was a secret warmth tucked deep inside me. I wasn't going home to an empty house anymore. I was going home to wait for my husband, and for the first time in weeks, the thought of his return didn't feel like a relief from the silence, but a joyful addition to a silence I had finally learned to fill on my own. The night had been a gift, a beautiful, complicated, and deeply human lesson in the many different shapes that love and connection can take.